Okay, class, we're going to cover a theme that actually ranges between a couple of chapters. This is in part 3 of our Rents et al. Book, the main textbook, and concerns the value of strategic communications, as well as the theme of advocacy for social change. And one of the big challenges, in my view, are those nonprofits that are engaged in preventative services. I'll give a quick example of this. When you ask anybody, virtually anybody, what is it that a firefighter does? What is the purpose of a fire department? Of course, people are going to say reflexively, to put out fires. And true, that's what they do. However, an effective fire department prevents fires. In other words, they keep a disaster from happening, which involves inspection, putting up rigorous codes, and education, among their other duties. And if they do those 3 elements effectively, there'll be less fires. And then people will often say, well, what's the purpose of a fire department if they're not putting out fires? And sometimes they'll even cut budgets. I mean, you have that kind of mindset. It seems as if fire departments aren't doing anything unless they're, taking their engines out with sirens blaring. But the fact is that prevention is better, obviously. It's the old Franklin quote, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So there are many nonprofit, social-oriented programs that are aimed at prevention. And then comes the problem of communicating why they should be around, because they don't appear to be doing anything, because these disasters are not happening. We're not having problems with, let's say, another environmental disaster like a dust bowl because of effective environmental and conservation practices. Or we're not getting the killer smogs. People don't realize this. Back in the 1960s, hundreds of people died in England from industrial smog, industrial pollution, and certainly it's shortening the lives of any number of residents of Beijing and the other industrial cities in China. So when you do a cleanup and then suddenly people aren't dying, how do you measure that, without having the disaster precede it? So this is problematic, and it is always an issue. So one of the things I think that an effective nonprofit organization that is oriented towards prevention needs to do is educate people along those lines, using the firefighter analogy and using others, that you are in a preventative thing and that the alternative is disaster. So this, again, spreads to the idea of strategic communication, trying to prep people and doing it at an early age. I think this is where you do outreach to schools and engaging young people and otherwise doing whatever it takes in terms of getting that message across. Maybe it's, everything ranging from hunger to homelessness to other charitable services, but beyond that, environmental programs and such. So these are the disasters that you're preventing, and you have to get the word out about that. And that also gets into the advocacy side, where you're trying to engage with policymakers so that, say, government grant monies are going to be available for the activities that you're engaged in. And so that gets into the idea of, well, lobbying is a dirty term, but you are still trying to communicate to politically consequential people what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the consequences would be if you weren't doing it. So, and this takes education. It doesn't happen by itself. Very few people become enlightened on their own along issues like this. So you have to develop programs of communication and devote resources to that in your strategic planning and in your overall message. So keep that in mind and consider how you might also apply that in other nonprofit organization programs that extend beyond the ones I mentioned, because I believe there are any number of programs that are oriented towards prevention and are worthy of recognition for what they do. Okay, that's the little lecturette for today. Carry on with week 3 readings, please. Thanks.